Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing soul coming to us from the US. We have Debbie Solaris on board today. Debbie Solaris is an ET contactee, galactic historian, interdimensional traveler, galactic Akashic records guide, and starseed intuitive, based in Colorado. After a fateful extraterrestrial contact experience a few years ago, Debbie awakened to her true star lineage and higher calling. Through her ancestral connection with the Akashic records, she has been receiving downloads of galactic historical information and universal spiritual knowledge ever since. She feels it's a big part of her mission, while here on Earth, to help awaken others to their own true divine selves and cosmic origins. So, Debbie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share my experiences and answer any questions.
Yeah, the first time I saw you talking about your experiences was on George Noory's show on
Yeah,
Gaia,
yeah,
but they were only just like small snippets, like reels.
yeah, I know. Yeah,
So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more of your story.
yeah.
So let's start it off. I've got a whole bunch of questions lined up, so let's get
Okay.
into it. So let's start from the beginning. When did your like first contact happen? I believe in 2012, perhaps.
Yes, it was 2012, and I had like the big event that happened in May of that year, but I also had a second visit in December of the same year. Just to preface, my experience, so people have a better understanding just how shocking this was, for me anyway. I wasn't a person that was a big UFO or big, ET, interest kind of person. I was raised Roman Catholic. I was, in a military family. I was actually in the military myself for a number of years. And then I worked quite a few years as a environmental health specialist for the public health department in, my local area, so it wasn't like a normal thing for me to talk about ETs or UFOs. It wasn't something I really followed. I think I got a little bit more exposure to it through my now husband. At the time, he was my boyfriend, and I noticed he read articles about the paranormal and UFOs and things like that. So I think it just kind of broadened my consciousness a little bit. But even then, I was very skeptical. So um, when I had my experience, I it happened. I was saying in 2012 because I think a lot of things were happening in 2012. I mean, there was the end of the Mayan calendar. There was a big election. I think that was a year that Barack Obama got elected, and then there was, kind of a lot of changes in our society during that time. And I felt at the time, just as a conscious human being, that things didn't seem like they were going in the right direction. It just seemed like it was going to hell in a handbasket, actually. So I always kind of joke that I'm a spiritual worrier, not a spiritual warrior. So I used to spend a lot of time worrying about things. I don't do so much anymore, but back then I worried a lot about things, and I mean just personal things, but also things going on with the planet. And so one day I went to bed and I couldn't sleep, so I just sent this like prayer out to the universe asking for help for planet Earth. I was just sending it out to any divine or extra dimensional beings that might be listening in. And I didn't even know really who I was sending it out to. It was just, just Jesus, Mother Mary, the Ascended Masters, angels. I don't care. It was, it was going out, So I spent like, I would say several hours just really focused on this prayer. And I really sincerely wanted to see, the planet change for the better, So I think my intent was good, but then the next, day I woke up and, things were back to normal. I forgot about the prayer and didn't really think about it again until 2 weeks later. I went to bed as normal, and then uh, went to sleep, and when I came back into consciousness, I immediately realized I was in a different reality. It wasn't 3D. It wasn't anything I've ever seen before. A lot of people might think that, oh, maybe she was just having a really lucid dream, or, it was kind of, just happened during dream time, but it was not a dream. It was really real. I guess that's the thing that stood out about my experience, is that it just was hyper real. It was more real than what you would experience during a dream, or even during, waking life. It just felt like everything was really amplified, if that makes sense. So what I noticed immediately was I was looking around, and it looked like I was in some sort of a craft. That became very apparent. But it wasn't like what you would see in Star Wars or any of the sci-fi movies, where, a lot of times they depict starships as being kind of mechanical, or like, metallic. It wasn't metallic at all. It was very, very organic, I guess. Looked like it was made of light and plasma-like material that was very organic. It kind of shifted and changed, but it had some sort of a structure to it, but it wasn't metallic by any means. And the ship seemed like it had its own consciousness. That was something also that came apparent, because it seemed like it was leading me to something, like it was showing like a series of lights or something that was leading me to another space. And so I just followed her along. A lot of people ask me, oh, are you scared? I said, no, I didn't have time to be scared. I was just trying to figure out what the heck was going on. So I didn't have time to be scared. I was just like, okay, the ship wants me to go here, I guess. And I guess, when you're in these spaces, you get this sense of the vibration, and I have to also emphasize that all the colors were more brilliant, the details were sharper. That's what made it seem so hyper real, was that, even with you and me here right now on Zoom, it just doesn't, there's a kind of a fuzziness, or a little bit of a, um, kind of a vague quality when you're in the third dimension, that you don't see when you're in these higher dimensions. Everything is just like crystal clear, so I knew I was in some sort of different dimension. I just immediately figured that out. So I followed the ship to where it wanted me to go, and it led me into this big room that I later learned was called the orientation room, which I don't know exactly what they mean by that, but I'll go with it. But it was a big room, and it had not just it had I would say about 4 or 5 extraterrestrial beings waiting for me in this room. And I could tell immediately looking at them that they were extraterrestrial. I mean, there was no doubt. I mean, they didn't look like Earth humans. And they didn't look like gray aliens, because, like I said before, I was reading articles that, my boyfriend at the time was reading. Now he's my husband, but that, about grays, and about, tall whites, and, so you're, about these beings. And I could tell, just by looking at them, they don't look like gray aliens. They looked a little different. They had somewhat larger heads, so I did notice that. And there was, their eyes were bigger, but they didn't have the gray alien features. It was much more refined features. They weren't super tall, but I got the sense that they were really pulling their vibration down, that they were maybe depicting themselves in a smaller form, in order to better interact with me. And when you look at these beings, their vibrations are so brilliant, like their auras are so bright, that you have a hard time even looking at them. It's just like you just see light and some colors. And then I had to learn to kind of take sneak glances from my periphery to see what they looked like. And that was really kind of interesting to me, like, oh gosh, trying to figure out what these beings are, and let me see if I can get a better look at them. And like I said, they weren't super tall, but I got the sense that they were pulling their vibration down, so that was part of what I was seeing. And at the moment, it was kind of like, I didn't even have time to be scared. Like people were asking, sometimes people ask me, weren't you scared? And I said, no. It's because these beings emit like all this love energy. Like it's just this really accepting, like you don't even, you just kind of feel comfortable around them. I don't know. It's maybe a different experience than maybe what somebody that might have interacted with grays or with insectoids might experience. But I just felt like welcomed and like, okay, these beings are okay. They're not going to hurt me, So I was thinking of questions to ask them, and I was wondering, do they understand English? Uh, what questions should I ask? And I was, formulating questions in my head. And then even as I was formulating the questions in my head, even before I could finish the question in my head, they were answering my questions. So they were tuning into me telepathically, which was freaking amazing, So I was just like, wow, they're answering my questions in my head, So I got real excited about that because there wasn't a language barrier. There was, I guess, when you're telepathically communicating, there is no language barrier. And there is no room for deception or lying or trying to hide things because you have that instant connection with these beings. So obviously I asked them, where am I? What is this? Who are you? Why am I here? So I asked the basic questions first. And what they told me, Jan, is that they were Arcturians from a star system called Arcturus. And I'll describe what they looked like in a moment, but because I know that was one of your questions, but what they told me was that their star system is located in a constellation called, but what that we call Bodas anyway, maybe not what they call it, but and they had like this holographic sphere that we were in the middle of, that they kind of illustrated some of their ideas, somewhat through telepathy and then also through the sphere. So it made it feel like you were there. I mean, it was really amazing. It was technology I've never could even imagine, so they were showing me like where their star system was located in the galaxy, and so you're in this backdrop of stars. And I asked them a lot of questions, so I was kind of wondering what the heck is going on planet Earth. Why are things just so difficult here? What's the deal with religion? What's the deal with politics? What's the deal with our social constructs? And basically, what they told me was that we're living in a 3D matrix construct that's not real. They kept using the word illusion several times, which I didn't quite understand what they meant by it, because I thought, well, things seem real to me, on the 3D, but they kept using the word, everything's an illusion. It's, and I asked why me, because I'm nobody special, I'm just, somebody that worked for the health department, in Colorado Springs, so why me? I'm nobody, important. And they said, well, you're part of our family, that, you have chosen to be on Earth, exhibit in a human body in order to do a mission. And they didn't quite tell me at the time what the mission was. I think they were just kind of giving me time just to sink everything in, but I remember we were there in that room for a while, and I kept asking question after question after question. Getting back to what these beings looked like, they did have larger heads. I would say larger than what we would consider human heads to have. I couldn't tell if they had hair or not. It looked like they didn't, but like I said, it was so bright, I couldn't look at them directly. Their eyes were larger. They did have pupils and irises. So that's what really made them stand out, as opposed to gray aliens where you just see these black eyes, and their features were very refined, very delicate. It wasn't like gray aliens where they look kind of scary. These beings looked very kindly. They looked, like they definitely didn't look alien, but they didn't look like, oh well, scary or anything like that. I could tell that, they had very slim bodies. I think they were wearing clothing. I couldn't really tell. And they had 3 fingers. I do remember that. I do remember the 3 fingers. I didn't quite, understand what that was until, I started reading about them later. Uh, and they just, they had somewhat of a humanoid appearance, but like I said, you could tell they weren't from Earth, so skin color was probably bluish green. And it's interesting because, since then, I've read other people's descriptions of Arcturians, and they seem to be, closely in line with what people describe classical Arcturians to look like. But I understand that Arcturians can come in many different heights, so they're not necessarily always short. I'm only 5 foot, so I honestly think they were pulling their vibration down so they wouldn't seem so scary or imposing, to somebody like me that's kind of short, so they did show me around the ship. There was some amazing things they showed me. They showed me, I think, the engine room. I remember that. And it was just like some sort of massive crystal in the, I don't know, it was just, like I said, it was technology I've never seen. And then the room that really stood out to me was what they called the sleeping room, but it didn't have any beds or anything like that. And I remember going into that room and the wall colors were changing to purple, and then it was like some sort of Asian landscapes. And I didn't quite understand why that was happening. And they told me, well, this is just images you find relaxing. So I was like, okay, whatever. And then they kind of cut me loose. So they said, you can wander on your own. We got other things to do. And I was like, okay. It was like, don't leave me, but they let me kind of cut me loose at some point, and I kind of wandered the ship, and I found myself in this huge atrium. It was kind of like the centermost point of I just call it an atrium because I don't know what else to call it, but it was several stories high. You have to keep in mind that the ship was huge. It was like a city-sized ship. I mean, it was, and there was hundreds of beings on these ships, and not all of them were Arcturian. As a matter of fact, there was quite a few different species of beings. I would say the majority of them to me looked humanoid. They might have had different skin tones or different features, but to the most part, I would say there were some that weren't, maybe some amphibian looking beings or something, but I didn't see any reptilians, so I did see some beings that weren't necessarily totally humanoid, but they all more or less were most of them were humanoid. And this centermost area had several levels. And like I said, it was very organic. And there was hundreds of beings just kind of walking around, going to different places. And I noticed that there was light shafts that were transporting these beings from one part of the atrium to another. And they kind of had a rainbow-like color, and they looked really cool because you're just like floating through the atrium, going to another part of the atrium. And so I was like, I want to go on one of those, So I tried to step on one, so I stepped on one and it kept throwing me off. And I couldn't understand what I was doing wrong. So about the third or fourth time I tried, I was caught by a being that I think was Pleiadian. I mean, he looked like a Pleiadian to me. It was a male being and very tall, looked humanoid, but when you encounter these beings, they have like a luminescence about them that you could tell immediately they're not Earth humans. They kind of glow. I don't know. I know that sounds dorky, but they do glow. Like they have really glowy skin, their hair glows. I mean, their eyes are slightly larger, so very attractive looking beings. And so the being was telling me, telepathically, this, I guess, Pleiadian, if you want to call it that. He told me telepathically, oh, you're not doing it correctly. You need to set an intention where you want to go first, then step on the shaft, and then it'll take you where you want to go. And so I thought, oh, that's a good metaphor for life, so, so yeah, that makes sense. Okay, he doesn't know where I want to go, so obviously he's going to throw me off, so I told him telepathically, I'll do it your way. Okay, so then I just picked a spot and then it started transporting me in the middle of the air. It was like on this rainbow-like light. And you would see like these, other beings, being transported, it was really kind of cool. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was in my bed, so I knew immediately when I woke up that something extraordinary had just happened and that I was not the same person, like something had changed, so I knew that something had shifted, something had changed. And obviously the first person I told was my husband. And he didn't believe me at first. He thought I was having a crazy dream. And I said, oh no, this was not a dream. It was very, very real. And then he told me, I don't know, I maybe told only, I would say, a handful of people. I didn't even tell my family at first because I was afraid of being ridiculed. This was back in 2012. I think now, alien contact is a lot more accepted. I don't know, maybe not, but maybe not in the mainstream, but in our community, it certainly is. But I didn't know how accepted it would be. And you have to keep in mind, I was still working my 3D job, so I definitely had it hid it from my 3D job. And obviously, I did I did have a spiritual teacher at the time, and I told her, and she told me immediately that I had a contact experience. And I said, but I'm not sure if I was there physically. It felt like my consciousness was there. I don't know if I was physically transported. I don't think so. Even though when I was on board the ship, when I would look at my hands or I look at myself, I looked like myself. I didn't look like a blob or anything, but um, I still looked like a human, but I I don't think I was there physically, if that makes sense. But it had a profound effect on me to where I would say it was definitely a life-changing experience, for sure. And I'm happy to tell you about the second visit, but I want to give you an opportunity to ask some questions if you want to do that.
Sure,
So,
thank you.
yeah,
Your story's so refreshing. It's so lovely. I'm so glad you came on today.
yeah.
Um,
Thank you. Thank you. I want to share that not all alien experiences are bad, So I think a lot of times we hear about contact and it's fairly scary, or people get probed or they get experimented on. And this was really, I don't know, it was very pleasant. Like I said, I was actually depressed after my experience, because when you're in those higher dimensions, you get that kind of high and you get, very attached to the feeling of being in higher dimensions. And then when you're back in the 3D, you go through this period of grieving and depression, which I'll explain a little bit more later. But thank you for saying that.
yeah, I totally get it. Now, regarding the Arcturians, do you get a sense of gender from them?
Um, I think they seem very androgynous, so it was hard to tell if they were male or female. I think it was a mix actually, but I think they're so androgynous, it's hard to really tell, like, oh, this is a female Arcturian or this is a male Arcturian. And they all kind of look similar, like that was the one thing I noticed too, is they looked very similar to each other. And I read later on that that's on purpose, that I don't know if people have read We the Arcturians by Dr. Norma Milanovic, but I think in that book, she's had her own encounters with Arcturian beings, and they explained that, the reason why they try to look so similar is not to have competition, so but yeah, they were very androgynous looking, so I couldn't really tell. I do think it was a mix of genders, but like I said, I couldn't have pointed out and said, oh yeah, this is a male one or this is a female one. But yeah, that's an excellent question. Sometimes I've thought about that myself from time to time.
One time, I had this experience with a gray. She was scanning my chest. All I saw was her face and like the three fingers just above where my pain was. I was having gallbladder attacks during that time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, but I felt she was radiating female energy.
Mm,
So, not knowing her, not knowing who she was, I knew she was
yeah.
female. So that was really strange.
Oh, that's awesome.
Uh,
The one thing I did notice, like after my experience, was that I had chronic migraines. Like I spent all of my life dealing with horrific migraines where sometimes I would have to go to the emergency room. They were so bad. And I mean, and they would knock me out for a day or sometimes even 3 days. After my experience on board the extraterrestrial ship, I didn't never had migraines since then. I haven't had one, and it's been like almost over 10 years now since I had that experience, and haven't had a migraine since. My husband noticed it too because he said, "You never complain about getting migraines anymore." He says, "I think it happened like after you had that visitation." I said, "Yeah, I think something happened on board the ship where." I mean, it wasn't like they totally eradicated all my health issues. I wish that was the case because I still had to struggle with stuff afterwards, but the migraines went completely away. So I'm glad that you were able to find like some healing with this being that you
yeah, it was
encountered. Yeah, it
yeah,
was
really,
really
really
awesome.
strange. You talked briefly about a crystal in the what was it?
The engine
The
room.
engine
Yeah.
room. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that?
I don't know. It was huge and it kind of glowed and it was in the middle of, I don't know, like it was kind of like it was within some sort of I don't want to say use the word mechanical, but it was some sort of uh, technology, I guess, that was maybe using the crystal for amplification of energy, or it was kind of like an energy device, I guess, for lack of a better term. And honestly, I don't remember everything the Arcturians have told me about what was going on, but I just remembered that huge crystal and it was glowing and it didn't seem like it was dangerous. Like we were fairly close to it and um it didn't seem like whatever, energy was giving off was harming us in any way, but it was definitely huge. I do remember that. So I think that's some way maybe the ship was utilizing the crystal for amplification of energy to transport the ship. Like I said, it was technology I've never seen. I mean, it was a lot of what I saw on that ship was just amazing technology. It was just like beyond anything you would even see on a sci-fi movie. Like even when you watch some of the sci-fi like Star Trek or um, Star Wars. I was a big Star Wars fan. I love Star Trek too, but a lot of times the technology looks like it was constructed or like somebody made it. It was very mechanical. This looked very organic. It just didn't look like um, something that was made by human hands, if that makes sense. But yeah, great question though.
Did you ever try to get into contact with the vessel?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I've tried. I have not had any visits, at least not. since then where it was kind of spontaneous. I, I think maybe because once you're on board the ship, you get very attached to it. It's like almost as if they don't want me to not want to come back, so it's almost like because I always wondered, why didn't I, why haven't I had visits since, and I think they just gave me just enough visits to get me activated, but not so that I become dependent on, wanting to go back, because it's very addicting being there. It's like, I'm serious. I went through months and months of depression after both of my visits, where you don't want to be here. You just feel, depressed and you're crying all the time. I remember I was commuting to work. So I had a, hour commute each way, and I would commute to work and I'd be crying in the car. Oh, I missed the ship. I wish I was back on board the ship, so I do think, it was purposeful for me to go back. I mean, I've had, meditations where I connected with my guides, or I connected with my star family. So I've, so since then, I've definitely, I stay in contact with my star family. It's kind of like a normal thing now for me. And sometimes they give me very practical advice, like buying this house that we live in now. I mean, one time my guides told me it's time to buy a new house. And I was like, really? Okay. I mean, it wasn't even something my husband and I were thinking about. It was just like, just out of the blue, they said, okay, time to buy a new house. So I don't question my guides anymore, So my guides tell me something, and I have some other stories too that I'm going to share with you in a moment. But when my guides tell me something, I just go ahead and do it. So I called our real estate agent, and within a week we were buying a new house. So I don't know. It's like sometimes it's very practical, and sometimes it's just very esoteric, So sometimes I get messages that are very, very esoteric. But yeah, that's kind of interesting that you asked that, because I do miss being on board the ship, even now, even, 12 years later. Um, I do miss, you know, uh, I miss the beings, even the Pleiadian beings. I miss them. I miss the feeling that you get when you're on board a ship. I think the closest thing I can describe to it is, like a near-death experiencer, when they are in some alternate realm and they have to make a choice whether or not they want to stay in that realm or go back, and then they choose to go back, and then they they miss that feeling of being in the higher dimensions and interacting with these, extra dimensional beings, so it's very, very similar to that. But yeah, that's an excellent question.
I had well, regarding that depression, I sort of went through that too.
Mhm.
I had what I'd call like a sort of Pleiadian angelic experience. And
Yeah.
this sort of blonde lady, all in white, showered me with love. And
Hmm.
every cell in my body felt love, and I felt paralyzed because of it, because it was so good. And I thought, am I in heaven? Am I dead?
Yeah.
And so there's like a whole story around that. So I call it love radiation. So it reminds me a bit of that.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. I felt like you just get bathed in this, love and acceptance and joy and all these really positive feelings. And then when you're back in the 3D, it's like we're so disconnected from everything here that we just go through this withdrawal experience. It's almost like a withdrawal, like withdrawal from a drug or something. I don't know, but I think that's why, my visits have been very limited, because you do get addicted to it.
Yeah.
Um, it's so anyway, I'll
Well,
talk about a little bit about my second experience, and then we can get into more questions. So my second experience was in December 2012, so almost exactly 6 months after the first visit. And it was a little bit different in the sense that it was the same starship. The being that was actually helping me with the shaft was the one that I saw when I had my second visit. So I didn't connect with the Arcturians at all during that visit. It was two Pleiadian beings, the male that helped me with the light shaft in the first visit, and then a female that was there with him. And basically they told me something like, we're going to have to be quick because we can't hold the transmission, or we can't hold the frequency. And I didn't quite understand it, but it seemed like they were having a harder time bringing my low dimensional self on board the ship or something. But so they told me to pay attention. Like, we're going to tell you some things really quickly and just pay attention, So I was like, okay, you got my attention. And so the information they were sharing with me was very, very personal. It was information about my father, who had committed suicide in 2007. And it was a devastating experience for me and my family during the time. I mean, because he just committed suicide out of the blue. And so they told me that, excuse me, I'm gonna try to straighten myself out here. So they told me that he was, his soul was going through like some sort of spiritual purgatory, but that wasn't the right word, but it was the closest thing. It was almost like he had broken a soul contract, and that he had to do what they call spiritual labors, or spiritual exercises to make up for the breakage of the soul contract. But they said he was okay, and that his soul, was happy, and not to worry about my father. And the other thing they told me was that hell was a human construct, that souls don't go to hell, so that was something I learned as a Roman Catholic. They said souls do not go to hell. There is no hell. Souls will choose to have certain experiences, and might seem like hell, but there is no, physical location called hell. And they said that my father's soul was okay, and he was happy where he was. And then the other thing they told me was, you have a friend who's been trying to reach us. And they described who this friend was. And it was interesting because I was going to have lunch with her physically the next day, So I was like, oh, okay, they're tuning into this friend. And they said, well, we've been trying to send messages back to her, but her frequency is too low. So she hasn't been receiving our transmissions. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll tell her that you're trying to reach out to her. And, so I was just like, okay, that sounds interesting. And then they told me about my cat. Okay, so I know a lot of people, that go on my website, they're wondering why I have this whole page devoted to my cat Piglet. And the reason for that is because Piglet is my greatest teacher. So she was my first teacher, and she was my greatest teacher. So Piglet, what they told me about Piglet was a very unusual cat. Okay, she was a hairless sphinx, so that all made her stand out in itself. But she was unlike any cat I've ever had. She was one of those cats that I could take her anywhere, and she would just be totally happy. Most cats are kind of skittish. They like their routines. They don't like being in the car. Piglet, you could drive her anywhere, and she'll just sit in the back seat like a human and be looking out the window and be totally happy. I could take her to any parties, anywhere with a bunch of people. She would just hang out with everybody. So I knew there was something different about my cat. So Piglet and I, because of her, I guess, demeanor, I thought, well, she'd make a very excellent therapy animal, so we actually both got certified as an animal assisted therapy team through the American Humane Association. And so we did volunteer work for 6 years. We worked with soldiers at Fort Carson that were wounded warriors. We worked with Alzheimer's patients, physically and mentally disabled children and adults. We also worked with children that were learning to read at the library. So we did all kinds of different programs during those 6 years. We were part of the American Red Cross, so we got certified through the Red Cross also. And so we did a lot of work with military families that have lost, their fathers or mothers. And so we did a lot of work, and what they told me about Piglet when I was on board the ship was that she was actually a Pleiadian being. So she was a Pleiadian soul that was part of the Pleiadian Light Council. So she was considered to be an elder or somebody that had some, a lot of experience, and that she had a contract with me to prepare me for my mission. So the whole thing of us doing the animal assisted therapy was training for me and how to be of service to others, so that's why I call her my greatest teacher. Because before that, I was just a regular human. I wasn't really focused on helping other people. I was just trying to get through I was traumatized, I had a traumatic childhood, I was a traumatized adult, so I was just trying to survive, just doing the human thing. And I think, doing the work with Piglet just, expanded my consciousness, to the point where I could even have an experience like the, extraterrestrial experience. So those were the three messages they had to share with me. And then boom, I was back in my bed and everything was back to normal. And it took a while, I would say, to process what happened to me. So it wasn't like I knew immediately, like, oh, I'm going to be this spiritual practitioner, and I'm going to, be a public figure, and I'm going to do this and that, and whatever. That wasn't even a concept at that point. I was just trying to figure out what the heck happened. Why did this happen to me? What was the purpose of it? And so immediately I started getting my hands on as many books about extraterrestrials as possible, so that would be a normal thing. Like, okay, what are Arcturian beings? Let me see what they have on Amazon about Arcturians. And the first book I ordered was We the Arcturians, because it, just seemed like it was the closest thing I could find. I know there's David K. Miller writes some really nice books about connecting with the Arcturians. So I've also read those books, and there's others, the Arcturian Anthology, by Tom Kenyon. I mean, there's all kinds of books now, but at the time, I was just going through this journey of research and trying to gain as much information as possible. So I took as many spiritual classes as I could. So I'm lucky I live in Colorado, where the spiritual community is very active here. There's a lot going on here. I mean, we're very progressive. So there's all kinds of offerings, different classes, different trainings, so I took quite a bit of different trainings and all kinds of modalities, so I was just being open, and I didn't know what the purpose of it was at the time. I would just go and take different things, like, okay, crystal healing. Okay, that sounds interesting. Let me check that out. Or Reiki, or Native American medicine wheel, I mean, it's just whatever, seemed interesting, but it all had a purpose. But I, at the time, was like a sponge, would just go to check everything out. And also the other thing I noticed was that my extrasensory perception really expanded. Like, I didn't have any abilities before. I mean, that was just like, I was just a dumb asleep human, and then after my visits, it was just like I was tuning into everything. I was for the first time ever, I was seeing UFOs a lot. I mean, a lot. I mean, and I think with UFOs, you almost have to be tuned into their frequency in order to be able to really see them. So I think that's why you can have like a group of people in the same location looking up at the sky, and not everybody's going to see the same thing because they have to be tuned in. And so I think that's why with the CE5 events, they always have people do the meditations and, try to prepare them, to expand their consciousness to where maybe they can tune into that. But yeah, I saw UFOs. And I mean, where it was even during the day, I mean, it was amazing. And then I was having downloads of information about galactic wars, galactic history, galactic star races, star systems. This is all information I never learned. I mean, I never had access to this information. I went to college, but they sure weren't teaching that in, regular university, So I didn't, I was all of a sudden I knew about star systems. I was like, how do I know this stuff? I never taken astronomy a lot in my life. I mean, I do have a science degree, but my degree was in biology, so I definitely wasn't a physics major or studying astronomy. So I didn't know how I knew so much about these star systems, which and this was happening for years, like I was just getting downloads and I was getting downloads about people. Like I would meet somebody and I would immediately know like, oh, they had a lot of past lives as a Pleiadian or their ancestor was a Celtic warrior. I mean, it was just kind of random stuff. And so I was taking Reiki classes in my hometown of Castle Rock. Castle Rock is located just south of Denver. It's a growing community. It's getting pretty big here, but it's considered to be a small town, but it's actually not a small town anymore. But we did have spiritual classes downtown, and so I was taking Reiki, and I was talking to my Reiki teacher. I said, I'm getting these downloads. I don't know where they're coming from. And she says, I think you're getting them from the Akashic records. And I said, what are the Akashic records? I didn't even know what they were. This was like in 2014. And she says, well, I teach how to read the Akashic records. You should come to one of my classes. And I said, heck yeah, sign me up, So that's how I got connected with the Akashic records. As far as, doing them as a profession, because before I was just like, I don't know what this stuff is, but I found as I was doing her classes that I had a natural affinity for it. Like I would just tap into the records and be downloading information about people, So I started off doing Akashic records reading as a hobby. It's kind of like, I was still working my job, I still had my 40-hour-a-week job and my little government job. And then I was doing, record readings on the side. And the reason why I came up with the name Debbie Solaris is not my real name, but I was trying to hide what I did from my workplace. That's the main reason. It wasn't that I was trying to be cool or fancy or, trying to, oh yeah, I'm so cool. I, do Akashic readings. It was because I just wanted to hide what I did from my managers and my coworkers because they were very judgmental about that kind of thing. And I didn't want them to know I was doing all this woo-woo stuff on the side, so that's why I came up with that name and it kind of stuck, so, I just go by that now. It's kind of like my, I don't know, stage name, if you want to call it that. But yeah, it's been like this massive journey. I mean, it wasn't like, everything was apparent to me all at once. It kind of like it was almost purposeful that I had to go through all of these experiences in order to, I guess, come to what I'm doing now. And it wasn't an easy journey either. It was very difficult. Like I said, depression, and then times where I didn't even want to be here, or times when, you go through that dark night of the soul experience, where you kind of question everything. And then you move past it. The other thing I want to mention too is I was having interdimensional travels, and I did experience some remote viewing, and some telepathic connections where, I would pick up on people's thoughts, which I didn't like that. I didn't like that part of it. Or I was interdimensionally traveling into other dimensions. That was happening a lot. I was just having strange experiences. One of the strangest experiences I was having was, for a while, I noticed, I don't know if this was government or who these beings were, but I was having black SUVs follow my car all the time. And then one time there was 3 black helicopters hovering over my backyard. And so it kind of makes me wonder if the government knows when somebody has a contact experience. Because they seem like, and these were all unmarked, like the cars didn't have any license plates, and there was like men in suits that were coming out of the cars. And so that was weird. And I still don't really have an explanation for it, but and it happened for like a year, and then it was like it just dropped off. It was just, I don't know if you've had other experiencers have similar experiences afterwards, but it was weird. But it wasn't scary. It was just kind of annoying more than anything else. But um, so it kind of, makes you wonder, like, how tuned in is the government with, some of these ET contacts, not that they're facilitating it, but that they tune into it, so, um,
Yeah,
uh,
they do tend to, well, they do want to know what you know through them. So
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so they're quite curious.
Yeah.
Um,
Then there was a time when my husband and I were having bad dreams of dark entities, breaking into our house, so I did a house clearing after that. I was like, oh no, we're not having that. We're not having any dark entities, so there's so you go through a number of strange experiences even after the visit itself, so
yeah.
that's part of the whole process.
Were they
So
shadow beings?
yeah, yeah, I don't know if they were men in black or what. They looked like just dark beings. And they were scary. I mean, they were kind of scary looking. Yeah, I would say shadow beings would probably be the way I would describe them.
I
So I
had
don't know if they were fourth dimensional beings or what they were, but I remembered I had a nightmare, like it was really scary. They were trying to pull me out of my bedroom window, and then the very next night, my husband had a dream that they were breaking into our house. And so I said, okay, this isn't a coincidence, So I ended up doing some house clearing work. So I'm like, oh, we're not having that, And then after I did that, everything was okay, so the clearings do actually work. Um, but yeah, thank you for allowing me to share my story at such detail, because sometimes, you're on some of these shows, like you were mentioning, on Gaia, you only have so many minutes to tell your story. So
Yeah.
you have to tell it pretty fast,
Wow.
So
I want everything.
yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah.
No, I think sometimes the devil is in the details, It's like you gotta, the details is what really might make a difference for someone. So
You talked a bit about your cat Piglet.
mhm.
Can you explain to us what happened to you on I-95?
Oh, it was I-25, but
I-25, okay. So,
yeah, that was a really bizarre experience. But um, so I used to do this animal assisted therapy with Piglet, So because I lived in Castle Rock, a lot of our volunteer work was in Colorado Springs, which is an hour south, or I would say about 45 minutes south, depending on where you go, but between an hour and 45 minutes. So we were constantly going up and down I-25. And I remember there was some event that she and I were going to, and she was in the car. She was in her little carrier, because I always had, there's certain protocol you got to have with animal assisted therapy. The cat can't just be hanging out. They had to wear the little vest, and they had to have like a leash on, and so just to keep protocol, I had her in my carrier. And we were in the car, and we got hit by a kind of a hit and run situation where somebody just clipped our car, and my car spun around. And fortunately, I didn't hit anything else, but there was pieces of my car all over the highway, and I was, terrified, so I sat there for a while, and I was trying to figure out what to do. Do I need to call somebody? And then there was this dark SUV that showed up, and a man got out of it. And I could tell immediately this man was not from Earth. Okay. He looked human, but he was extremely tall, and he had very light blonde hair. and he was just too good looking. I don't know. It was just like, you encounter these beings and you're like, okay, there's no humans that look this good. I mean, he was wearing a plaid shirt and blue jeans, like he was trying to fit in, but there was something off about his outfit. I don't know how to describe it. Like you wouldn't see people in Colorado dressed like that, um, so I knew immediately that, okay, there's something off about this guy, but he asked me if I was okay, and I said yes. And he said, "Let me help you pick up the pieces of your car." And I said, "Well, thank you." And then he said, "Okay, here you go." And then he got back in his car and left. And then exactly 5 minutes after he left, another similar SUV showed up and a woman got out of it. And again, she was very tall. She looked blonde. She had kind of reddish blonde hair. Way too beautiful to be just a normal, good Samaritan or a good person. Just, I was like, what the heck is this? And then she asked me, "Are you both okay?" And I said, "How did she know there's both of us in the car?" Because Piglet was in her carrier, and there was no way somebody could have looked in because we had tinted windows and figured out there was somebody else in the car. So I knew immediately, okay, this isn't a normal human. And so I figured they were probably Pleiadians, but um, so I just told her, yeah, we're okay. And then she said, let's move your car out of the way. So she helped me get my car to the kind of helped guide me to I guess the shoulder of the highway. And then she checked in and she was like, "Are you sure you're doing okay?" And I said, "Yes, I'm fine. I just need to call, I don't know, OnStar or somebody, so and then she got back in her car. And again, it was like the way she was dressed looked like somebody that was trying to fit into Earth, but didn't quite get the sense of the fashion because her dress looked almost a little old fashioned for somebody that was that young and beautiful. She was wearing like a sweater that was kind of wrapped around her shoulders, and it was kind of like this pastel color, and it was just weird. Like, sometimes you look at beings and you're just like, okay, that looks a little weird. It doesn't look like any way like a, human in Colorado would dress. Looked like somebody that was trying to fit in, maybe didn't quite get the memo. But um, so um, so I meditated on that experience afterwards, and uh I don't know, I think I was having a dream or something. It wasn't even a meditation. I think it was a dream. And I was sitting down with a being having tea with Piglet, and I used to go to a lot of tea places. There was a tea place in Manitou Springs that we'd go to after some of our animal assisted therapy visits because they just loved her there, so they would just like let me bring the cat, so I would sit and have some tea and I don't know, a cookie or something, and Piglet would just hang out. And so I had this dream I was having tea with a being, but it was this blonde woman, that I encountered, on the highway. And I asked her, "Who are you? What happened? I don't understand what happened." And she said in the dream that she was the higher soul aspect of Piglet, and that the male being was her counterpart, and that they were checking in on us to make sure we were okay. Um, but it was nothing to be worried about. It was nothing bad. It was just they were checking in on us because we had, a pretty, scary accident. And so it's kind of interesting how these extraterrestrial beings can check in on us, and then there's alternate aspects of us that, maybe, and that was when I first started having, I think, an idea that, what? There's not just one of us. There's like alternate aspects of us in many different dimensions. And how interesting that these alternate Pleiadian aspects of my cat was able to visit us in the 3D, that they're able to manifest themselves in the 3D, which is really pretty crazy. But thank you for asking about that, because that was probably one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had. And I still don't even know if I could describe it, like give it justice, because it was such a weird experience. It was just too weird to be just a kind of random, coincidental kind of thing. Especially when the female being asked if we were both okay, it's kind of like how did she know there was?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's, so I had some experiences, where I've astro traveled and was able to visit Galactic Federation ships, and another visit where I was able to remote view Tal Ceti, so it's just bizarre things that I think once you get tuned into that frequency, you're able to have those, abilities and experiences. But thank you for asking about that. That is one of my fondest memories. And I think it just goes to show that there's extraterrestrials among us. They're not, it's not like we're here alone. It's just that people aren't tuned in. Most people aren't, so they don't see them.
Your experience reminds me of my dad's when I called in my second craft,
Yeah,
uh, like a week apart when it just flew over the tree line. I
yeah.
had the impression to go and get my folks. So I ran back inside after doing the C5, and my mom sees it when it's like fairly close. And my dad saw it a bit further on. But from that moment on, my dad started having contact. And not too long ago, he woke up and he said, Jan, I woke up. He was sleeping, of course. And in the bedroom was a weird looking clown.
Oh,
So
wow.
he's your normal clown, but something was off, how the way it dressed.
Yeah,
So I thought that's like a typical type of gray screen image that you're talking about. And
yeah,
so
exactly.
that reminded me of your story.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you shared that. I personally hate clowns, so if I saw a clown in my bedroom, I would be freaking out. I don't know. I do not like clowns. There's something about them that are really freaky. Probably a childhood experience, but that's a story for another time. But
I remember watching the movie It when it came out.
oh yeah, that's freaky.
So
Yeah,
traumatizing.
yeah, freaky. Um, But
Yeah.
didn't you have like an experience? You said you had an experience you wanted to share with me. So I want to see if I can tune in to see what's going on with your experience. So
Regarding the personal question I had.
yeah, the personal question. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll read it to you.
Okay.
I wanted to find out because I never knew why I was having these experiences
Yeah.
until I met my British fiance,
Hmm.
a gray abductee from England, and she told me that my maternal grandmother's bloodline, which her surname's Aylwin, so her name
Mm.
was Mary Angel Aylwin,
Oh,
and
wow.
through her I and through her I found out that she was that Aylwins were from noble they were noble. So my grandmother was from noble descent. She didn't know. All she knew that she came from an important family. So we thought like they were Irish, but we didn't know we didn't have
Hmm.
growing up in the 70s, we didn't have the internet or
Oh,
access to that
yeah.
type of
Yeah, of
info,
course
right?
not. Yeah.
So I know the manor's still up, and through Google, I was able to find out that the word Aylwin comes down from a really old bloodline called Elfwine, which
Mm.
means elf friend, noble friend, magic friend, and only recently, through thanks to a documentary on the Elohim, the Nephilim,
Hmm.
uh, the Anunnaki, I found out that the word elf in Elfwine, which is AELF, means shining ones, and wine
Mm.
means friends. So my ancestors are called friends of the shining ones, and shining ones are they're like gods basically. So
Hmm.
yeah, I was curious if you were able to get any info on that.
Yeah. So you said this was in the UK, particularly
Yeah, the
UK.
family. Yeah,
Okay. And so I just know this because um, my husband is also from the UK. His genetics, I guess, are and through, I think, some readings and in a galactic astrology reading he had, we discovered that his genetics came directly from Merlin, which is really freaky, but and he's part of the Stewart family, which is Scottish, but they were a prominent family. They were, considered to be nobility in Scotland. And that was his mother's maiden name was, Stewart. So I do believe with the UK in particular, and probably with your family too, that there were certain families that had extraterrestrial genetics that were maybe had contracts with extraterrestrials. Either they had contracts with extraterrestrials or they were descended from extraterrestrials that were colonists on planet Earth. And actually, the UK had a lot of colonies. And the reason a lot of ET colonies, because it's a location on planet Earth that there's a lot of ley lines going through it. So it was a vantage point for quite a few extraterrestrial groups to spend time there. And my understanding is that there was Pleiadian beings that had colonies there. There was Lyrans, and then there was also Andromedans that had colonies in the UK. So a lot of times when I was doing Akashic readings for people with UK ancestry, like yourself, I kept seeing, oh, you have, Andromedan genetics, or you have Lyran genetics, or you have some sort of direct genetic line to extraterrestrial beings. Now, because your family's connected with elves, I'm guessing, or elementals, my guess is that, I'm not, without you really connecting with your Akashic records at the moment, but you probably have an Andromedan or a Lyran connection. Okay, so I would say most likely your ancestry is Lyran Andromedan, and your family is probably very connected to that. Because there was a lot of elemental beings that that came to Earth with these extraterrestrial colonies. So a lot of the fairy beings and the elementals came to Earth from other star systems. A lot of people think they came from Earth, but no, they actually originated from other star systems. And there was a lot of elemental beings associated with the Lyran planets and also with Andromeda. This would be Andromedan constellation. Okay, so I do think your family probably has and humanoid genetics, but Lyran Andromedan. And just looking at you, you have a lot of Andromedan features. You're very lanky, very thin. That looks Andromedan to me. You look more Andromedan than you do maybe Lyran. But I would say Lyran Andromedan. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I'm picking up.
Well, it gives me something to research at least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and you might want to maybe explore your your galactic ancestry through I don't know, a QHHT session or Galactic Akashic session. It'll be interesting to see, what connections you have, because there's a reason why you're doing this kind of work. And I think it's mainly to expand consciousness. I think you're mainly trying to get people more open to the idea that, we are not just, solitary humans, in this little planet just hanging out, So I don't know. I hope that helps. But when I read your personal question, I thought, oh, I just felt like a lot of love, for your family, like it must have been difficult for your family to carry these genetics and not feel like they fit in or feel a little different, you know what I'm saying? So I wouldn't be surprised if your grandmother or some people in your family had psychic abilities, but maybe they didn't quite understand it, so.
I know my grandmother, she told my mom that she would have a lot of dreams about flying. And my mom, before she passed away, dreamt about seeing a beautiful, like blonde person on a
Mm.
lake. And eventually, he did like a motion with his hand, and eventually it turned to what she described was a reptilian, but she didn't know how to describe it because she felt so much fear from that reptilian.
Oh man.
Gray, leathery skin, um,
Mm.
very dark, and she didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine that would be scary for sure.
Yeah. But she was into angels and um, pendulums, crystals a lot.
Yeah,
That
gotcha.
was
Yeah, and I'm not
fascinating.
surprised to hear that. Yeah, you see that I think that was the case with my husband too. Like his mother was always interested in the paranormal and UFOs, and I mean she was just a church going lady. I mean she was I think the master of the choir or something. I mean she was very musical. And so for that reason, my husband Terry was always interested in UFOs and the paranormal. So I think there's a connection there. So and I do notice that a lot of people in the UK are very tuned into the idea of the paranormal and what's beyond for that reason, because a lot of their genetics did not come from Earth. Um, so yeah, that's one of the things I want to explore. That and the connection with King Arthur and Merlin and the extraterrestrial connection there. I'm fascinated by that. I just think I don't think those beings were not from Earth. At least Merlin wasn't. I don't know. I think there was something he was magical for a reason. Okay, so
Like if Avalon was actually a ship, or I don't know,
yeah,
an
exactly.
island
Yep.
in the middle of
Yeah,
nowhere. Yeah.
Avalon was actually the name of a Lyran planet. And so I think when Merlin and King Arthur were trying to establish Avalon on Earth, I think maybe they were trying to establish the original Lyran human template, that this idea of paradise, on planet Earth, because the original Avalon was a paradise planet. So I do think it's a kind of a template or a concept. But yeah, there could have been a starship. I
Mm.
mean, I wouldn't rule out that possibility either. So
Well, just thinking of High Brazil again.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
Uh, you talked about like the supernatural. Did you have like ghost stuff happen to you growing up?
Not so much ghosts, but I had some experiences where I would be in danger, and at the last minute, like a being would show up and save me. And at the time, I thought they were angels. I thought, okay. I mean, there was like more than one experience. It was like three or four experiences where I was either stuck in a snowstorm or I was drowning, and some being would just show out of the blue and just pull me out of the water or would save me from the snowstorm. I mean, it was just bizarre experiences. So I do think I was watched over, like I don't know if it was my star family or angels, or I mean, at the time I thought they were angels. I mean, because a lot of times these beings they looked humanoid, but they again had this look of being beyond human. They didn't look like your typical humans. Maybe better looking, or some component of them didn't seemed a little off, maybe. So I did have those kinds of experiences. But not so much ghosts. Really didn't tune into ghosts that much. Not like my husband. My husband's more into the ghosts and stuff than I am, but I do think maybe as a child I was tuned into that more, but then you get it beaten out of you, going through, you know, trying to fit in 3D Earth, you get teased a lot or bullied by kids, and then it's like, oh, I don't want to be different because then I'm going to get bullied. So you learn to suppress a lot of it.
Yeah. So it's funny that you talk about that because my experiences happened to me as a kid, and they came back to me as soon as I finished college.
Interesting.
So I'm out of the sort of like brainwashing system, and as soon as I'm on
Oh
my
yeah,
first time, then I was in a position for it to come back. You talked
Oh,
about
I'm glad to
the
hear it came back for you.
yeah.
Because a lot of times it takes us years and years. I mean, I didn't have my experience until I was like a month before I turned 50, you know. I mean, it's just like, you know, like why did it take so long? But I think the timing was perfect, actually. You know, I think if I would have awakened before, I wouldn't have really not known what to do with, you know, that experience. But I'm glad that it turned back on. But I think you're right. I think a lot of it is we go through heavy programming with our educational system and with religion and, you know,
Yeah.
societal constraints.
You talked about the Akashic records. So how do you get into contact with it? Is it like a non-demand type of thing for you?
Um, Before it was kind of spontaneous, like before I knew what I was connecting with, it was like when I was talking about the downloads of information, I do think it was coming from the records or maybe my own soul memories, but I didn't know where they were coming from. Since I've taken, you know, formal training on how to access the records, I do follow a process, you know, so I use the Linda Howe method because it works for me. There's various different methods people can use to access the records. But honestly, I do it more as I guess, a process to make my clients feel comfortable. But honestly, I can just tap into the records just like that. It's not even like I have to go through the process. It's like I just set an intention, like, hey, I need some information, and then you know I'm able to tap in. And a lot of times, it would feel like a discernible click in my head. Like I would know I'm connected when I feel this kind of frequency shift or like a click. That's the best way I can describe it. And it almost feels like a vibration shift, and then it's like, oh, I'm getting some answers, or I'm seeing some things. For me, the experience is a multi-clair experience, you know, so I do get a lot of visuals. I think I'm very clairvoyant, but I also get clairaudient messages. I get clairsentience. I get um, clair. There's different clair. I can't remember all the names of them, but sometimes I'll smell smells. Sometimes I'll even taste things. I mean, and a lot of times I feel feelings. So if I'm doing a reading for somebody, I will feel the feelings that they felt during their experience, you know, if I'm checking into one of their past lives, which sometimes is really freaky, you know, like you're feeling the fear or you're feeling whatever it is that, you know, or the love or whatever it is that they're feeling. So that's why sometimes doing, you know, Akashic readings can be very exhausting because you're getting multiple streams of information all at once. And which I think, you know, really you get immersed into the records, but then you also have to use your discernment and your, I would say, intuition in order to interpret the information that's coming through, you know. So that was part of um, I would experience that every single time, you know, whether I was doing a reading for myself or for a family member or for a client. That's part of the reason why I don't do Akashic readings on a regular basis anymore, because it got to be really, really exhausting. For 10 years, I did readings 5 days a week, you know, like I did several readings a week. I mean, like, you know, 10 to 20 readings a week. Uh, and it was starting to feel like a job, you know, like, okay, you know, I'm doing readings for one person after another. And I just couldn't sustain it anymore, you know. And I really do enjoy being in the records. I enjoy, you know, the information I receive from the records. But when you're doing that many readings, it could really wear you down, you know, energetically, you know. So last year in October, I had to make a really hard decision not to do personal readings so much anymore. I'll do it occasionally for certain people, but not like, you know, like on a regular schedule. just because it can get very, very exhausting. And so I do think there's a limit. And I don't know if, other practitioners feel this, like, I don't know, Reiki or people that do hypnotherapy, or QHHT. I do think there's a point where you reach a burnout. And the other reason too why I stopped was because my guides kept telling me that it was time for me to take my message to the masses, that it was no longer just adequate to do one-on-ones with folks. And I do miss the one-on-ones to a certain extent, because I do really enjoy, helping people, guiding people through the records. But it was time to become more of a public figure. And I fought that for years. I didn't want to be a public figure. I am an INFJ in the Myers-Briggs. I'm an introvert. Okay. I'm not somebody that loves to be out in public, on the stage talking to people, but I've gotten used to it, so now I do it because it's part of the mission. But I have to really kind of prep myself to do that. It doesn't come naturally for me. But my guides kept telling me, okay, you're going to be on the stage, you're going to be talking to thousands of people. And I'm just like, nope, nope, nope. And then finally it was just like, okay, like, I know I don't really, when my guides tell me something, eventually I do it, because I know they have my best interests at heart, and that's part of my mission. But I didn't really want to go do the public figure thing, but now I am doing that, and it's part of my journey and it's part of my mission. And if it helps people, then I'm all for it. But I got a very clear message that I'm not supposed to just work with people one-on-one. It's supposed to be more like, exposing this to lots and lots of people, so that's the journey I'm on. And that's why I do these conferences and events. And it's why I'm working on a book. So, we'll see what happens in the future, so.
That was a future question of mine. So
Yeah.
thanks for getting that up.
Yeah. It's almost like my guides are telling me, giving me they're answering your questions without you having to ask them. So,
That's so funny.
Which I think is cool.
Yeah. You talked about Lyra and the Lyrans and the Pleadians. Now I've heard that the Pleadians might be an offshoot of Lyra, the Lyrans, and there really a sort of galactic battle and they had to flee?
So what happened to so let me backtrack a little bit with the Lyrans, or the Lyrans, or however you want to pronounce that. I think both ways is fine, but so what happened to the Lyrans is that they were the original human races, so there was two basic races, which were the blue skin races and the white skin races. And they lived in paradise planets, so they were just like, they weren't motivated to colonize anything because they didn't need to go anywhere. But they got attacked by the Draconians in Draco, so the reason why we have all these different star races right now is because of those wars. So they ended up being called the Lyran Draconian Wars, and it was devastating. I mean, I saw these wars through downloads of information. And I remember when I had my first spontaneous past life regression, where I saw these wars, I cried for months because it was just so devastating. I would say a lot of people died. I think Lissa Royale Holt, who writes The Prism of Lyra, which is a really great book if you guys want. It's a little teeny book, but she packs a lot of information in that teeny little book. But she talks about how when she connected with her channel told her that 50 million Lyrans lost their lives. And I believe it because I saw it in my own experiences. But so these are people that went through a horrific traumatic event and lost their planets. I mean, their planets got destroyed, so a lot of them, that did survive ended up having to, migrate to other star systems. And so the Pleiades was one of those star systems. And I honestly think they picked the Pleiades because it was 500 light years away. it's like, let's get the heck out of Dodge and get as far away from the Draconians as possible. So they took the long journey to the Pleiades. And so the Pleiadians were actually descendants of Lyran's refugees and maybe the indigenous humans that were living in the Pleiadian planets. So a lot of people think that the Pleiadians are all these Nordic looking, beautiful blonde, beings. And a lot of them do have that appearance. But the Pleiadians actually had a mix of colors, so I don't think they were necessarily all blonde and blue-eyed. I think there was a lot of them that looked very indigenous. A lot of them that had, darker skin, so there was a lot of diversity in the Pleiades, which I think sometimes, the AI art doesn't really depict that so much, um, but yeah, they were kind of a mix, I guess, kind of, the indigenous humans that were living in the Pleiades and the Lyran refugees that were trying to find refuge in these planets, in these star systems, so in a way, the Pleiadians are descendants of the Lyrans. I wouldn't say that they were just all Lyran. I think they mixed and, they had different mixes, but they were heavily influenced from their Lyran experiences. So I would say that's very much correct, and as a soul, I spent a lot of time in the Pleiades. I mean, that's why I think I have Pleiadian guides, is because even though I consider myself an Arcturian starseed, if you want to, use starseed terminology, but because that's my origination point. But I do think as a soul, I spent a lot of time in a lot of other systems. That's why I know the history of them so well. And I kind of feel like I take something from all of them, like I'm this kind of hybrid soul that I just feel so connected to all of them, in a sense. But I do know I spent a lot of time in the Pleiades. I have great love for the Pleiades, actually. It was one of the few civilizations where they did a lot of things right. They had that balance between technology and spirituality, which I wish we would see here on Earth, so but yeah, I hope that answers your
Yeah,
question.
thank you. Well, to stay in that field of questions, Barbara Marciniak writes that she in one of her books, I can't recall which one, but she talks about the Earth, the Living Library, and that there was a space battle, like at the beginning of time for Earth. And
Mm-hmm.
I had on a guest called Yesenia de Capua, and she remembers coming down. She was part of the star people that were fighting to protect Earth, and she remembers coming down as a warrior, and she actually died on the
Mm-hmm.
planet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if you have any information regarding that time.
You're talking about the battles.
Yeah, the battles. Yeah, I'm not sure. Was it again with the Dracos? I can't
Yeah,
recall.
it was probably Draconians. Yeah. So Earth is an interesting little planet because, and it's in a vantage point. The reason why so many extraterrestrials are so interested in it is because it's in a very good vantage point in our galaxy. And then it's one of the few planets where you can bring in a lot of different DNA, and it just, I mean, it's very sustainable for physical life. So I think for that reason, there was a lot of extraterrestrial beings interested in colonizing planet Earth. And so in the beginning, we saw a lot of colonization, like I was mentioning about, your ancestry and, the UK, there was a lot of colonies there. There was, well, the Draconians were interested in Earth too, so they wanted to take it over. And so, for a while they did take it over because that was during the dinosaur age, so the dinosaur age, so they were inhabiting it for quite a while because the dinosaurs were basically lower caste reptilians that were created using Draco DNA, so they were creating like maybe dumber versions of themselves or lower level versions of themselves, but in a massive scale, so they, And so they were inhabiting, pretty much had a stronghold on the planet. But that wasn't the intent, to have like a bunch of massive reptilians taking over the planet. So there was these wars that kept going on between the Pleiadians and the Lyrans and the Draconians and maybe the Galactic Federation races, trying to get Earth back. And I don't know if they were all that successful because I think they were successful for a while because, after the fall of the dinosaurs, then you started seeing these civilizations like Lemuria come, forward, and then Atlantis, and then Egypt, so they were successful for a while, but then I think the Draconians and the Anunnaki got a little more stealthy about how they were going to take over, so they weren't going to directly attack them anymore. So they were taking them over from the inside out. So they were infiltrating the governments and, influencing people through brainwashing and, programming and things like that. So now I would say, our planet is definitely being controlled by these negative factions, but they're losing their stronghold once again, So I think there's too many of us waking up, and we're starting to realize, okay, there's more to the story than what we've been taught, in school or through our religion or whatever. And so we're going to go through another battle, but it'll be more of a spiritual battle, not so much, a physical one like in the past. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've read those books too, and I really resonated with a lot with what Barbara was sharing in her books. I do think she was definitely tapped into something, maybe her past life memories. But I do know that her books are very popular for a reason, because a lot of people, I think it just triggers people's memories, and there's something about them that, I don't know, they just, they're activating in a sense. Very, very thankful to people like Barbara Marciniak and Barbara Hand Clow and, all these other folks that were around for decades, bringing forth this information when it wasn't even really a thing, so thank you for sharing that. I love that.
I guess they were the first like volunteers. So do you have any information about the three ways of volunteers?
Yeah, that was a book that made a big, I would say, made a big impact on me. And I'm a big Dolores Cannon fan. I kind of feel like, in a way, like Dolores Cannon was a very Arcturian soul, and I feel like, in a way, she handed the baton over to me and other people. But so I feel like a lot of what I do is trying to carry on the work that she started. But when I read that book, The Three Waves of Volunteers in New Earth, it kind of put the puzzle pieces together for me. Okay, so why now? Why is there so many of us that don't feel like we come from here? And so whenever I would do readings for people, I was always obviously one of the things we do is, with Akashic readings, we ask people their birth dates. And so it would give me an indication of what that person's mission was, so why did they choose to be born in 1946, or why did they choose to be born in 1991, so there's three waves of volunteers. So I'm a first waver. I'm kind of tail end of first wave. So I'm the original generation, or part of the original generation of Starseeds. And so for the first waivers, it took us longer to wake up because there was so much programming on the planet, especially in the 50s and 60s. I think the 70s, things started shifting a little bit, but then we got the indigo children that were coming in, which, Dolores called the second waivers, that were being born in the 70s and 80s, so these folks were the system busters, they were busting the system. They were the ones that were asking questions. They were defying authority. And so we saw this, wave of revolution occurring during those times. And then I would say the kids are coming in the 90s and the 2000s. Those are the third wave kids. And these are the folks that are going to be the system builders. So we're seeing a lot of Andromedan starseeds coming in now, whereas before Andromedan starseeds were very rare. It was, and even Arcturian starseeds are rare. So we saw more Arcturian starseeds in the second wave. And now with the third wave, we're seeing a lot of Pleiadians still, but a lot of Andromedan starseeds, because these are the people that have the technology. Andromedans are well known for being technological masters, and so we're going to have to come to some higher level of technology in order to rebuild this planet. And so that's basically that's kind of a very basic description of the three waves of volunteers. But each of these, and I do believe that the reason why we started coming in now is because the consciousness had to be at a certain level. So after the World War II was when we started seeing a big influx of starseeds coming in, so kind of trickled in at first with the first wave, and then we started seeing a lot come in with the second wave, and even more coming in now with the third wave folks. But we're on this mission to bring the Earth to a higher level of consciousness and to the fifth dimension. Earth was always meant to be a fifth dimensional reality. It was never meant to be mired in the 3D, so, but it's been stuck here because of those negative factions, that I talked about. And so now, we're all here trying to bring Earth to its true destiny, which is to be part of the greater galactic family. But yeah, there are a lot of extraterrestrial beings that are interested in this planet. It's why we had all these visitations, why we still have visitations, And I think it's interesting that more and more of us are starting to have our own ET contact experiences, and how wonderful of you to share that through your podcast, that kind of normalize it a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Not that it's so weird or that you're, crazy person because you had an experience.
I'm just
I would
trying to
say that's
lessen the
quite the
fear.
opposite, right? What's that?
I'm just trying to lessen the fear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's part of your mission, is to bring awareness to it.
We
So yeah. But no, I'm a big fan of Dolores Cannon. I wish I would have met her in person, never had the opportunity. She passed away, I think, in 2015, or not too long ago, but she definitely left a legacy, and it's one that, I hope to carry on to, whenever my contract here ends, and for others that are also part of this journey.
well, thankfully, Julia took the mantle and
Yeah, she did.
continuing
Yeah,
her work.
she's doing a great job. Yeah.
We talked briefly about a C5. Now, do you have like a specific protocol, perhaps, for those listening in, if they want to maybe get into contact with the star people?
Yeah, that's I'm not a CE5 expert. I would refer people to Dr. Stephen Greer for that. I've never been to any of his events, but I have been to CE5 events. I would say a handful of them. And so the whole process is basically to raise your vibration. So with extraterrestrial beings, you can't necessarily, you know, they're not going to go all the way down to our low dimension. I mean, we got to meet them halfway somehow. So I think a lot of what Stephen Greer was trying to do with his work with CE5 was trying to help people to raise their vibration to a certain point where they can tune into that frequency where they could see UFOs or even have interaction with extraterrestrial beings. So a big part of his process, from what I understand from the CE5s I've been involved with, is having this group meditation. So everybody's in a circle and they're all holding hands and we're all just connecting with each other and sending out a lot of love frequency, out through each other and also out to the ethers, so we're just sending out this love frequency. And he does have a process, and I've seen the process done different ways, but the most important part is to raise frequency, so whatever it takes for you to do that. And so at that point, you're asking, permission to connect with these beings. You always want to ask permission. And then you just sit and wait and see what comes through. A lot of times you'll see certain things in the sky. You might see flashes of light, or you might even see, something that might look like UFOs. Or I know in some cases, this never happened to me, but in some cases, some people might actually have beings that visit them, wherever they're at. It's best to do this when you're at night, when the moon's not out, so when maybe during a new moon night where the stars are especially bright, so you can see as much as possible. I think sometimes when people try to do it when the moon's out, you miss, some things or there's a lot of light pollution, but you definitely want to make sure that you're in an area that is pretty dark and has very minimal light pollution. As much, so probably out of the city or, somewhere away from, in a rural area would probably work. Or out on a beach where, it's pretty dark. I would say some of my most successful have been out on the beach because you could really see the night sky. I mean, it's like you can see a lot of stars, especially in areas where there's not like a lot of light, so that's what I could say about that. But I'm not an expert on CE5, so I would say if people want to know more about it, they should connect with Dr. Stephen Greer. I actually took his remote viewing class in Boulder. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, he definitely has a connection. I think I get a very Syrian energy from him, like he's connected with Syrian beings or had lifetimes in Sirius, but he's done some groundbreaking work too. I'm so glad there's all these folks that are, they're going out on a limb, and sharing this information.
Both times that I called in the same craft, which flew over my house, and the first time, and at my dad's house the second time.
Yeah.
I did a sort of hybridized version of Dr. Greer's protocol,
Yeah.
and which is funny. So that's why I tend to point to Dr. Greer or try to do
Oh,
what he
yeah.
does.
Yeah, no, I think he did some groundbreaking work too, for the time. And and he was featured on Gaia TV quite a bit, and now, he has his own, movies and things. So I think it's good. And I think it's kind of a group effort. I don't think it's like one person's going to have all the answers. I think that's very purposeful. I think, we all have a little piece of the answer, and, we all share it, and like I said, not everybody resonates with what I talk about, and that's fine, but for those that do, I hope whatever I share helps.
Well, let's call it a day, Debbie. It's been fun. Do you have like perhaps another story you might want to share or a closing statement to get out?
I don't know if I have a story. I think I just want to share that, for those of you out there that always felt like you were different or, didn't understand it, you might want to explore your connection with the star beings and the star races. And I would invite you to take a deeper dive into that. And hopefully that helps you on your Earth walk. So, and that includes maybe having your own ET contact experiences. Since this is the topic of the show, I would say, just keep raising your vibration. And the easiest way to raise your vibration, honestly, is to be of service to others. So, So definitely work on that.
You also offer services through your website?
Yeah, I do. I not doing personal readings at this time, at least not for the public. So if you're interested in connecting with me and with the work that I do offer a yearly, once a year, Galactic Akashic reading course. It's an 8-week long course. And you're welcome to sign up to be on the waiting list for that. The next time we're going to be offering it is in 2005. So it'll be kind of earlier in the year. And then we offer periodic webinars, and you could also see me in person at the various events that I'll be involved with, either online or in person. But I am going to be part of the Lyran conference. Speaking of Lyrans, that's through Portal to Ascension. So check out their website. I'm also doing the Awakening of Humanity through Portal of Ascension. That's also in October. I will be in Sedona in October for the Cosmic Awakening Conference. After that, I'm flying to Germany. And I'm doing the All Shift Happily Now conference in Germany with Tim Tactics and his crew. And I'm also going to be part of the Galactic Origins cruise in December with Portal to Ascension. So lots of events to be involved with. So if you're interested in all that, just check out my website, subscribe. I'm also on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, so you can follow me there as well. Thank you.
Lovely. You're busy. I'm happy to see that.
Yeah.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for coming on. It's been fun. You're a lovely person.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I don't know if we've had past lives together, but I definitely feel a connection with you. So I hope that our work continues on some levels. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Those watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.